Hi dear students, let's continue with food hazards today, and today we'll be talking about the chemical hazards. Chemical hazards could be of different varieties. Now they could be cleaning chemical residues. For example, we use lots of chemicals for cleaning and sanitizing the food contact surface. Now let it be a small scale industry or let it be a large scale industry, always it has been found that all the surfaces which will come into contact with the food surface has to be cleaned using certain chemical residues. And sometimes it has been found that those chemicals, if they are not being properly chosen, those chemicals could also be served as a chemical hazard when they infiltrate into the food we produce in a food industry. The second category, it mainly includes the factory contaminants. Now, since lots of food has been produced in a food industry, the chance of the pest infiltration has been found to be very high. So, to control the pest, we might use certain chemicals, and to maintain the machinery, you might use certain lubricants, and you might have various other things like coatings, paints, refrigerants, water treatment chemicals. At different locations of the factory, such chemicals would be present. But if they enter into the food supply unit or the food processing unit of the factory, it would affect the quality of the food. So it should be taken much care to prevent the entry of such factory contaminants into the food processing line and finally into the last package of food that we release out from that food industry. We can see that agricultural residues such as pesticides, fertilizers, fungicides, antibiotics, as well as growth hormones which are being applied to the food when it is being produced, that also could enter into the food product. Now, it doesn't mean that all these chemicals like pesticides, fertilizers, fungicides, they need not to be applied in the food industry which we are producing. But if the raw materials which we purchased for the production of our food are already in contact with a pesticide, fertilizer or a fungicide, as well as an antibiotic and all such things, and if they are not being lost by a processing which is being done in our food industry, then they would finally end up into our package. So it would serve as a chemical hazard in our food product even if we are not adding a pesticide. So much caution should be taken when you choose the raw materials for the production of the food. Coming to the case of food allergens, different products such as eggs, fish, milk, peanuts, sesame, seeds, soy, sulfites, tree nuts and wheat could serve as food allergens. Now you might think, okay, if these are all chemical hazards, how can we include them in our food? Of course, there is no saying that you cannot include these things because they are allergens in the food product, because only some of the population is being found to be allergic to these foods. So the caution that a food industry should do is, if they are using such products in their food, these ingredients in their food products, they will have to provide a label that they are being used in the final product. So unless and until that label is not provided, the consumer will not be aware of the presence of the food allergen. And if the label is not being provided, the consumer can even sue the company if an allergen is being present without any notification in that particular food product. So the labeling of the product is very much essential to prevent the drastic effects which could have caused by a food allergen. We can see that various naturally occurring harmful chemicals such as mycotoxins, scrambrotoxins, mushroom toxins, as well as the shellfish toxins also do occur in the natural products. Now mycotoxins are the fungal toxins, and you know about shellfish toxins. Shellfishes itself, they would produce some toxins, and the mushrooms also, some of the mushrooms are being found to be toxic. So you should choose those varieties which are non-toxic in nature. The final category, it mainly includes the industrial heavy metals. They could be of lead, zinc, cadmium, arsenic as well as mercury. Now where do these arise into the food? As I mentioned earlier, if the place where the food grows or where the raw materials from which you have obtained the food, if those areas are being infiltrated with or contaminated with the industrial heavy metals, the food as such will bioaccumulate all the heavy metals into them, and that would ultimately enter into the food that we produce. So that the removal of such industrial heavy metals is important. Now, removal is not easy, so you have to choose your raw materials from a safe area. So, let me talk about the naturally occurring poisonous chemicals. We have already told some poisonous plants such as rhubarb leaves and mushrooms, and poisonous animals such as puffer fish, and you can also have sometimes algal blooms and mole toxins. These are all could be served as the ones of natural occurring poisonous chemicals. Then the chemicals which are added to the water via water. Now, excess chlorination could cause more chlorine which has been found, and we have already mentioned, I guess the agricultural chemicals, the chemicals added during the food processing like additives which are being added, that they also could serve as a chemical hazard. Now, if you can add, previously we had seen an example in which more amount of monosodium glutamate was being added. Okay, that MSG or Chinese salt is something which can be added as a food additive, but the higher quantity of that makes it as a chemical hazard. So, caution, the term chemical hazard might not be just the presence of it, it will also be based upon the quantity of the chemical which has been present in the food. Now, histamine, okay, that is also a allergen which has been released by the bacterial conversion of histidine in some fishes to histamine, resulting in this chromboidal food poisoning. And testing is mainly done by simple alcoholic extraction and quantification by fluorescence spectroscopy. I just added this slide for your reference because you might think, where does histamine come from? Because histamine is something which is mainly produced basically in human bodies. We are aware of human bodies, when we get allergy, the histamine is mainly produced. But at the same time, in the fishes also, as a result of chromboidal food poisoning, the histidine amino acids might be converted into histamines, and that could release would be a toxic to the fish industry, the fish food. And the allergens, we have already mentioned this earlier. I hope you are clear with the chemical hazards right now. And let me just conclude here with some chemical hazards. You can have mercury, sometimes cadmium can come, arsenic can come, these are all heavy metals, lead. Then you have pesticides, herbicides, algicides, fungicides and antioxidants also. Sometimes some antioxidants could serve as chemical hazards. And veterinary drug residues, that is the drugs which have been given to the animal. They could also include antibiotics which have been given to the animal, some wax esters, cyanotoxins, ciguatoxins and marine biotoxins. These are all some chemical hazards which could be present in the food that we produce. And how do we have to analyze these chemical and hazards? Now, there are different techniques. I cannot just minimize it into a single slide over here, but I would like to just give you an outline of different techniques which could be possible. Now, you can check the nutrient value by using various techniques like ash, moisture, crude fat, nitrogen Geldal method, protein, the fiber soluble, fiber insoluble, the starch, the cholesterol, the analysis of the sugar spectrum, the presence of preservatives, vitamins, minerals, trace elements, antioxidants. These are all can be analyzed, and you can use different techniques. Sometimes you might use spectrophotometric techniques, sometimes you might look HPLC techniques, sometimes you might use GCMS techniques, or you might use LCMS technique. It depends upon what you have to analyze in the food. The chemical depending upon what chemical you have to analyze, the technique which you use for the analysis of that in the food would also be varying. We would be describing that, I think we have already described that in a previous semester, the various techniques which can be used for the food analysis. And I hope this is clear right now. So, depending upon the chemical moiety which you need to analyze, the technique could be different. It could be spectrophotometric analysis, it could be a TLC analysis, a chromatographic analysis, or it can be GCMS, LCMS, or sometimes even neutron activation analysis could also be used when you have to find out trace elements of some chemicals in the food. And with this we come to an end of the chemical hazards as well as the analysis. We will be talking about the microbiological analysis in the coming sessions. Thank you for you once more.